Hello, morerunes here. I'm going to show you how to ready a sword for Fable, or in this case, a mallet or hammer. So, starting from your weapon in Blender, as you can see, it's fully textured. Um, that's for a whole different tutorial. What you want to do is open up the sword template, which can be downloaded by the link in the description of this video. So open up that. Now make sure you note the name of your blend file. You have to have saved it. You don't need to have exported anything yet. It's running awfully slow. Alright. Let's try this again. Alright, so once you've opened the sword template, what you're going to want to do is go to File, Import, actually Append or Link, and you want to choose the mesh, the blend file of the weapon you're working on. In this case, it's hammer.blend. Choose the object hammer time, because that's what I called it, and load library. And it may appear to not exist at first, but you've just got to go searching for it. So up here you can change it to animation by clicking that, and you can see wireframe, or you could just change your view to wireframe, and you can select your mesh, go back into top view. I'd go back into model, and if you go to edit mode, you have to go to edit mode to reorientate this. What you want to do is rotate it 180 degrees, or however it needs to be, and scale it up. And if you want it to be proportional to the hero, you want to make sure that the handles, or the hilts, are roughly the same diameter as the sword template. So right about there. Significantly shorter, and you want to line up the top of the handle with that part, just like that. So then go back to object mode, select the pieces to the template sword, and delete them. So now you just have these helper objects, and in the case of a mallet, you're actually going to want more than one of these, because there's going to be weapon hit point position A and B, and the augmentation ones. But for mallets, you need 2 augmentation helpers. So like you have Augo 1 and Augo 2, but you need to duplicate those with Shift D. Because these also need to go over here as Augo 3 and Augo 4. That way you have your 2 hit point helpers, and you have 4 augmentation helpers. But this is for mallets. If it's a sword, just go ahead and leave it as it was. Just make sure you move the helpers where you want them to be. So once you have your helpers in the right place, I wouldn't mess with this one. As long as you have your hilts aligned, you shouldn't have to mess with the weapon focus. But later, if your sword is or mallet is rotated wrong, your character is holding it wrong, then you can rotate that to fix it easy. Once you have it all aligned and scaled properly, make sure, well, go to solid first, make sure that the normals are right. You don't want to see anything like, say, this. If you see that, and you know that there's mesh there because in solid view it's obviously there, what you want to do is go into edit mode and make sure that those faces, select those faces and flip the normals so that in textured view it'll look like that. So when you're ready to export, just select everything, make sure including the helper objects, go to File, Export, choose DirectX, uncheck that so that it says right-handed system, and then click Export All. Do not export selected, export all. Otherwise it won't include the helpers. And save it somewhere as like hammer, mesh, and export DirectX. So you have your hammer mesh. Go ahead and open it up. I use this program Notepad++, and it's very good for this because it'll highlight the beginning and end brackets. See, as evidence there when you stick your cursor next to them. And this makes it really easy to tell where things begin and end. The next thing you got to do is make sure that you have a template mesh to work with. So go ahead and open up Fable Explorer and export one if you have not done so. Here I will show you how to do that. This is a very important step because the way that Blender exports DirectX files is not compatible with Fable in entirety, so you need to take elements from the DirectX file that was exported from Blender and merge it with the one exported from Fable. So scroll all the way down here to the bottom until you start seeing the weapons. They'll be almost at the end. And just do something like katana steel. You don't want to do anything with the word sword in it, because that'll screw up your DirectX file. So don't use iron longsword or anything, or iron sword. Just use something like katana or cleaver. Oh, actually, I forgot, this is a hammer, so we want to use a hammer mesh. Or in this case, a pickaxe. Not much of a difference, really. And go ahead and save it as template weapon mesh or something similar, and close it. It'll give you the texture too, but you don't really need it. Go ahead and open up your template weapon mesh alongside your hammer mesh or sword mesh, and then find where this begins. It'll say frame and then the name of your object, and then frame transform matrix. You can ignore that because you don't want to mess with that orientation. And then whatever your mesh is named. In this case, I'm just going to ignore the mesh name. So select right before that beginning bracket, and you're going to select all that stuff, but just leave your cursor there before that bracket. And scroll all the way down to the bottom of your original file. And you can see where that ends. It's highlighted. So go ahead and select all the way there by holding shift and clicking at the end of that bracket, copying, going into your template, and you can see where the pick hammer mesh begins. So select right before there, just like we did a minute ago on the other file. Scroll to the bottom successfully. Scroll up until you find the end here, and because of the way this works, things are divided differently, just select all of them except for the last bracket and paste over it. So you should have 3 brackets, and if you highlight that last bracket and scroll back up, you can see that it ends just the frame pick hammer, and that mesh hammer steel. No, actually we need an extra bracket. So go ahead and add an extra one there. That way it will end mesh hammer steel a 1. You always want to make sure that you have the right number of brackets, and this is why Notepad++ is good for this, because it highlights the brackets. You want to make sure that you end this one, but not scene root. So once you have the proper number of brackets, scroll to the bottom again, and you'll see all the helpers. And you want to go back into your original mesh, and sometimes they're up at the top. In fact, usually they are. And just find your first helper here, and select just the data from it. You don't need the brackets, because you're just going to paste it over the data of the other one. And this one's Algo 3, so we're going to skip that one, because it's not in there yet. Actually, you can just basically copy these if you're making a hammer, and paste them in. You'll just need to rename them to fit these. Well, no, actually, no, you should be fine doing that. But that's only if you're doing a hammer. If you have a sword, you're not going to have Algo 3 and Algo 4. But if you are doing hammer, just copy those. Next, you have your hit point position A. Select the data from that and copy it. Go over here. That was position A. And find it over here in the template mesh. Paste it over the data. Paste it over the data there. Do the same thing for hit point B. Paste it over that data. Remembering not to grab extra brackets, because you don't want to end things prematurely in the file. Augment O2, copy the data out of that as well, and paste it over the data in the Algo 2 helper. Algo 1. Do the same thing. Just keep copying out of your original and pasting into the template until you have all of the helpers involved. And finally, weapon focus. Might not be a big deal, but oftentimes it will be rotated differently depending on what file you're using. So go ahead and paste it in there. See, the numbers are all wonky there. So that should be all the helpers. If you had extra helpers, like say a particle attacher, you just copy that out and paste it into your template mesh, making sure that it's named appropriately, because you can't always fit the whole name inside the Blender name slot when you export it. And then go ahead and save it, because that would finish. And name it something like Hammer Final. And that is the DirectX file that you want to import for the tutorial's sake. If you know what to do from there, you can end here. But there's other tutorials for adding the weapons. But just because people have questions about it, I will show you how to assign textures to your weapon in ShadowNet, Fable Explorer. It's kind of slow. So go to graphics.big. Usually you'd want to make a new entry and stuff. For now, I'm just gonna overwrite a different mesh. Go ahead and load your mesh. Select you want Hammer Mesh Final. Where did I save that? Oh, hammer final? I don't see it. Oh, you know what? I forgot to save the .x at the end. How silly of me. So making sure to add the file extension, go ahead and load it. And it looks like my orientation might be a little off. But basically you just select that, go to the materials tab and select the name of thing and assign your texture there, whatever ID it happens to be. Set max texture layers to 1, unless you have a specular map or a bump map, in which case it's different. If it has alpha, if it's transparent, set that to 1, but this is not, so make sure it's 0. And voila, it's textured. So have fun making weapons.